Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to listen today. I'm Neil Wellner with the Iowa State Patrol. I've been employed with the state of Iowa since 1986. Kind of been fortunate or not fortunate, depending on how you look at it. I've been involved in large event planning, working them, and then also from an incident command position. So I've got a little bit of experience in it. I was one of the original people that did the Ragbri alcohol team, so I did a lot of work on that and some other events like the Iowa State Fair and some Jones County fairs and stuff like that. So it's going to be pretty informal today because it's kind of hard to talk about event planning with not having a specific event to talk about. However, there's a lot of key things that are essential to any of this stuff, so we're just going to kind of hit on those points and hopefully enlighten you a little bit on how law enforcement is looking at this. So Steve already covered it, but it says please remember to mute your microphones when not in use. If you have questions during the presentation, you can either type them out at the end, and then I think he told you about to receive credit for the presentation, fill out the survey at the end of the presentation. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff on my notes here. So here we go. So what is an event? You know, in the world of ESF 13, which is public safety and security, event is by definition a scheduled non-emergency activity. So in the first responder world that we're dealing with, we're used to dealing with incidences. So normally we go to something's already catastrophically happened, we respond. We've got a lot of protection with what the code allows us to do for an incident, but when you start dealing with events, the event planning is to try and prevent something to turning into an incident. So you just need to understand that, hey, an event may not be an incident, but every incident is some type of an event. So, and I'm not going to read the slides to you. You folks can take a look at those if you choose to. But that's the definition right out of the FEMA book. Also, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, event planning consists of coordinating every detail of a meeting, convention. So basically, you're in charge of everything. So what message we're trying to push, who we're trying to push the message to, where the event's going to be held, and how people are getting to and from. So you basically oversee this. That's the Department of Labor definition. The industry definition is basically the same thing. It's just kind of got a little bit of a business spin on it. And for them, they use event planning as a process of managing a project such as meeting, conventions, trade show, ceremony, team building activities, party, or convention. Event planning includes budgeting, establishing timelines, selecting and reserving the event sites, acquiring permits, planning food, coordinating transportation, developing a theme, arranging for activities, selecting speakers and keynotes, arranging for equipment and facilities, managing the risk, and developing a contingency plan. Those to me basically are saying the same thing. It's just, you know, from the government perspective, from the Department of Labor, they kind of stay away from the budget stuff. So when we work from the government, we don't really work on a budget event. We try not to spend our budgets or waste them, but we don't really care how much it's costing us if this is going to be the right thing for public safety. Now, under the industry definition, hey, it deals with them trying to make money. So they do have to watch that budget very, very closely. So when you start dealing with the industry and stuff like that, when you start asking for specific signs or locations or computers to help do things, message boards, they kind of balk a little bit at that because they're in the business of making money. So to me, like I said, both definitions basically mean the same thing, but the key to this is, hey, you're going to select the meeting site, who's going to go there, how are they going to get there, and what potential problems could we encounter with this group of people, and you develop the contingency plans from there on out. This is kind of where ESF 13 starts to interact with the government, interacts with the non-governmental agencies. We try to figure out what's needed and what's not needed. If it's a government agency, that's the authority having jurisdiction. It's pretty clear ESF 13 is going to be involved in somehow. So basically, like the Iowa State Fair, or currently, right now we are doing a ton of VIP visits. So those are all government-sponsored events. So ESF 13 or whoever the local jurisdiction is for law enforcement is going to be in there developing how to get people in and out, contingency plans, and all the stuff that deals with security. Now, when you start dealing with a private entity, a non-governmental agency starts to get a little fuzzy because you got to figure out where your obligations ends and where it starts. If they're in the business of making money, government has to be really, really careful. We don't want to get in there and start telling them how to do things, but yet we want to get the information because this event could truly spill out into a government area like a roadway, a river, significant mass casualty incident and stuff like that. So we kind of want to have our nose in it. We got to be real careful about how nosy we are so we don't get ourselves into trouble for litigation. So if you know of any significant events in your area of responsibility, you as the government official probably at least needs to stop by that person that's hosting that or where the event's going to be held and touch base with them and kind of get some preliminary information, decide, hey, do we really need to develop a plan for this, or how big an event is this going to be? But you need to do the reaching out. Very seldom will the non-governmental agency come and talk to you unless they think it's going to be a security risk on the inside and they're actually wanting to hire your law enforcement officers to assist them. So we at the government, we're going to get involved. I always try to figure out who I need to have there. So I want to find out who's going to host this organization because they're going to have all the information on when the event starts, what are they doing at the event, what kind of information is going to be presented. Is it controversial information? And we could have a protest type situation starting to set up. They have a lot of information. They also probably know the outlay of the event place, so that can actually help you out with just kind of getting some preliminary stuff. So once we figure out, we get the hosting agency there, and normally their first meeting is very, very, very generic. It's, hey, we got some law enforcement there, we got EMS and fire there. I'll admit it, we forget about the local EMA all the time because the fire's there and the law enforcement's there. But you need to definitely include the EMA because he probably has a ton of contingency plans and resources that can help you with this. Normally we forget the DOT, Public Works, government officials as needed. So if we were doing an event at the Capitol, we're going to try and get the highest legislative person there to help tell us what they can and can't do, what they want to see, and stuff like that. We also get a governmental public information officer to push information out. This could be as simple as working with the Traffic Control Management Center with the Iowa Department of Transportation to help them push out messages in case we have traffic things. And then one that people don't think about, we never really invite but needs to be there, is a prosecutor. Whoever's the legal authority in that area needs to be present to find out what's going on and to find out what kind of problems we could be getting ourselves into, and then how are we going to deal with them, and have we covered all the legal aspects of dealing with people and problems. Pre-planning meetings, when we do that, the old rule of thumb through the Emergency Management Association is you got to have all the key stakeholders there, should be in attendance. That's true, but you need to be really, really careful that this could get huge in a hurry. So like for law enforcement, for instance, when we're doing it, say we have an event here in Des Moines and somebody's going to come into the Des Moines airport, I know right off the bat I'm going to have to involve Des Moines PD, Polk County Sheriff's Office, and the Iowa State Patrol. Depending on what's happening, it could be as simple as just the big bosses show up to the first meeting, figure out what it is, they bring the information back to our office, and then we start having subcommittee meetings to figure out, okay, Wellner, you're in charge of all the traffic routes and stuff like that. Just to understand, you want to have everybody in the room so everybody has the same information, but just make sure it's manageable because it can get out of hand in a hurry. I've seen that happen, especially on the Ragbri route. You get people back and forth causing problems. You just want to make sure you control it, get the information, and get out of there. Some other government agencies that people forget to look at or they overlook is public health. Public health has inspectors. They, in this day and age with the COVID-19, they're going to have all kinds of inputs on crowds and how we gather them in and what we do. So you want to include somebody from public health if you think that's an issue. Inspections and appeals, they do a ton of work with inspecting food places, vendors, amusement games, all kinds of stuff that has to do with social gambling and things like that. So you're going to want to involve them if that applies. One that really gets overlooked a lot, I worked along with Mississippi for 8 years, is we forget to contact the DNR and the Coast Guard. If you have an event along the river, because that's usually where people want to have it, you need to make sure you have somebody available to help you deal with water issues. And you also want to make sure you let the Coast Guard know, especially in the Mississippi, so they're aware that there's an event going on. If something were to happen, you got to start closing channels and doing stuff. You want to have the DNR involved up front. DNR also deals with waste disposal, animal product issues and stuff like that. So if you have animals there, health of them, inspecting all kinds of stuff, like I said, it's very hard to decide who needs to be at the table until you get that basic information. I always involve the local public officials, so it could be the mayor, councilman, somebody like that, especially if I was in town, because I don't know some of the local ordinances. I deal with state law, not so much local law. So I want to make sure we're not violating something. And then some other non-governmental agencies, you know, could be who the vendors are, if it's a food truck event, if it's a baseball game or a football game, something like that. You got to have those people involved to help get this planning meeting started off to see where you want to direct this information. So the huge question always comes up is, hey, what's our obligation at this event from the government standpoint? And I really can't answer that. I can give you what I think, but I just don't know until it's specific to the event. So the simplest rule of thumb is whoever was overseeing the event has the authority having the jurisdiction. So they kind of are the responsible party, especially on private property or inside that venue. Now, I've been talking out of both sides of my head here, is that, yeah, I get really, really concerned, you know, hey, if, like parking, for instance, they always want to stop you right as you go onto their property to collect that fee. But if that is backing traffic up on a main thoroughfare and causing accidents, I'm going to have to deal with them to get this stuff moved. So my obligation may be actually going up and visiting with them and coming up with a different plan on how to get these people into the event faster and safer. So it's a toss-up. So pre-planning meetings are a must in my opinion. At least an exchange of information are a must, so you can kind of figure out what's going on. We're gonna want some input into what's happening, so that way we can kind of control the events that's off-site. It's a good thing for everyone involved to know how each other's operating, because if the event turns into an incident inside, we need to know what they have for resources inside, and they need to know what we have for resources that are currently outside or could be there in a little bit to assist with this problem. Again, it gets very, very, very foggy when it comes to whose obligation is what. A lot of times I'll be asked when dealing with a private entity, hey, will you help develop our contingency plan? Will you help with the security plans? Will you make sure this is going off without a stitch? And I'm more than happy to review somebody's plan, but I'm just like always, it's your plan. I may give you some suggestions, but it is, at the end of the day, it is your plan. Because once you start putting your name on some of that stuff, you can start assuming some liability for your organization, for your government entity. And I don't want to see anybody get into trouble. But I also want to make sure you understand, get the event dealt with and the incident dealt with, and we can sort out the paperwork afterwards. That's what we all have attorneys for, and it'll get muddy if something bad happens. But at the end of the day, as long as you can look at me and tell me, here's why I did what I did, and it makes good sense to me, you're 99.9% of the time going to be covered in this. So I just tell them, hey, I'm going to walk through their venue, figure out where things are at, just to kind of make some recommendations. And again, when I talk about a venue, I mean, it gets complicated when it's a building, but it gets even more complicated when it's an outside venue, because now you're talking about temporary structures. You're talking about not being able to control the heat. You're not able to control ingress and egress. It just gets very, very cumbersome. You want everyone working off that same plan, so that's why we're having these meetings and having these discussions. And like I said, it just gets to be an animal sometimes. So I went in and took a look at what FEMA expects from us, and of course it's a pretty broad definition. They talk about public safety, security, facility, and resource security. Okay, that's, depending again if it's a government or non-governmental agency, the security planning, the technical resource assistance, public safety and security support, support to access, traffic, and crowd control. Those are things that ESF 13 designates for law enforcement or public safety to deal with. So we're going to kind of take a look at those and kind of give you what I think should happen. Public safety, every event, we must ensure the authority that's overseeing this operation has been identified, and if any of the following duties are necessary. I want to find out, hey, are you going to need law enforcement? Because there's a big difference between a church event and concert that has serving alcohol with a loud rock band. We know we're going to have problems. We just have to figure out what it is. I always have the fire safety guys come in and take a look because I don't know the square footage and stuff like that, but I need somebody in there that knows that kind of stuff. Is like, hey, am I trapping these people in this facility or venue? I also get an EMS there because we're going to have some type of event inside, and how do I get my outside resources to the inside or the inside resources to the outside? We're trying to figure out what's going on. And again, like I tell you, it is very, very hard to discuss security for an event when we don't know what the event is. But what we're going to look for is what's the size of the venue, where is it at, how long is it going to happen, and other specific concerns that can be identified, such as weather, wind, size of the venue content, or the event content. It can just get out of hand in a hurry. We don't do a whole lot with this facility and resource security. We talk to the whoever is in charge of this. We want to know what they want. So normally they're going to say, hey, we think we're going to have problems with people on the inside, so we want somebody that has some law enforcement ability to come in and deal with the problem. So we decide, hey, do we think this is just going to be a soccer mom kind of event, or is this going to be a loud band and drinking problems and stuff? We also try to find out who's responsible for what. Hey, what's Neil bringing to the party, and what is the authority having jurisdiction bringing the party? We also talk to them about what the scope of work is. What do they expect from us, and what are they providing? You got to get it worked out up front. And at the end of the day, do we even have the resources to help this venue? Iowa football game is a perfect example. For instance, they may hire 40 or 50 additional law enforcement officers to come in, but if you take 10 of them from us, from the Iowa State Patrol, that may not leave me people to deal with my normal duties. So you kind of got to weigh, hey, how am I going to do this? I don't want to be completely depleted for resources. And do I need a subject matter expert to assist? Some of these events that I've dealt with are getting very technology savvy, and I am not a computer person, as you can tell. What I need is somebody there that knows how to work computers, can help deal with preventing hacking and stuff like that. If this event is going through some type of computer, I need a Jensen, basically. But also with that subject matter expert is, how's this venue getting electricity? Could it be that from Mid-America has a place on site, so we need to notify Mid-America we need an electrician there? Is it provided by the non-governmental agency? Or is it gas power generators outside, so we need to talk to the vendor that supplied them to make sure somebody's there, because if it goes down, how do I get this thing back up and running? Excuse me. For the security planning, we basically, when I deal with them, I ask them right up front, have they had an event like this in the facility already? And if so, what did you have for problems? And have you already developed a security plan on how to deal with this kind of stuff? I just ask them because the work may already be done. You just may have to tweak it a little bit. And then I also talk to them, do you need a security plan for anything else? So an Iowa State Fair is a perfect example for me. So at the State Fair, we, for public safety, deal with everything on the inside of the venue. Des Moines PD deals with everything on the outside of the venue. Well, now we're parking so many cars on the facility, we've had to expand our patrols on the inside to cars. And do we need a security plan to deal with just people breaking into cars? So this just continues to evolve as you identify problems and how you try to mitigate that kind of stuff. And who's responsible for the additional security plans? Again, I go by the rule of thumb, if it's on your property, it's your problem. I want to look at it and give you some suggestions, but again, it is your problem, not mine. The technical resource assistance right now, like I said, this is just a huge field, but what we're seeing right now is truly we've got to get better at the cyber protection of these venues and stuff like that, because that's where stuff's getting hacked. You know, it's kind of, well, like the Zoom stuff. When this all started with COVID-19, everybody's hacking that stuff. And again, I know nothing about it, so I have to have somebody that really knows this kind of stuff. Hey, if this event, do we think we're going to have some type of criminal investigation? What do I need to have available that day? Do I need to have detectives? Do I need to have evidence technicians? Do I need to get a hold of the Fusion Center and make them aware that, hey, you need to start monitoring this, you know, set up geofencing around the facility, look for keywords that could indicate there's going to be a problem? What kind of signage do I need? You know, do I need signage at all? Do I need to have a mobile command post there? You know, do I need the aircraft around? Do I need a tactical team? And the WMD you guys are really familiar with is, you know, weapons of mass destruction. Do I need to get the 71st involved? Do I need to make sure the state hygienics lab knows about this? And also the other thing that we really bring to the table from public safety is we're a field force multiplier. There's not many agencies at the drop of a hat that can call and we can say, hey, drop the hammer, and we can get 30 guys there within an hour. That's what we do. So we try to know what the event is. I try to prepare for it. Try not to ruin guys' days off, but hey, I make them aware that, hey, I got something going on in Iowa City. I may need some help, so be prepared to leave and come to work. And again, if we don't have something that can help people out, I probably know somebody that does. You know, if I just start reaching out to people like EMAs, local sheriff, local chief, FEMA down below, you know, there's certain criteria that has to happen before we can access federal law enforcement, but that is available if we would need it. Continuing on, public safety and security support. Again, you know, we're going to try and help them if we can, but we got to know what do you want? Can we even do it? And who's going to actually pay for these resources? You know, because hiring guys off, if I'm bringing in 10 different officers for my agency, you know, by contract, they probably need to be paid overtime or get compensatory time off. Who's responsible for that kind of stuff? So you kind of got to work out all that public safety and security up front. Again, you know, like the Iowa football games where they hire a lot of different agencies to come in there and help them because we're busy on the outside and around the field. We just don't have the manpower to dedicate to that. The thing that I see that goes wrong with these events immediately is if this event turns into an incident, say you have a medical problem, you have a small disturbance inside there, you have a stage collapse, you have something that you didn't even think about and it happens, do we have the real resources to respond to that? Well, a lot of agencies start stealing from their normal road duty. So if I've got, in District 1 here, which is Des Moines, if I've got 4 cars out for 6 counties and I've tied 3 of them up helping getting traffic into somewhere, I still have other stuff to do. You cannot bleed yourself dry hoping nothing bad happens because you're going to get caught in between a rock and a hard spot, and it's not going to go well for you. You know, and people like a snowstorm event, we at the patrol again. You know, we're pretty good about coming out and helping, but most snow events really only last normally 12 hours. You know, from start to finish, cleaning it up, doing stuff. We can kind of withstand bringing people out. What happens is if this turns into a 3 or 4 day event, you know, you have to figure out, can I sustain this amount of manpower for 2 to 3 days? So when I'm dealing with this kind of stuff or I'm preparing my battle plan, I try to use the minimum amount of guys I can and have people in reserve. So if this happens, I can bring some people in because I got to try and get some people some time off and get rest, especially during these instances. This one gets a little complicated, support to access, traffic, and crowd control. It is truly driven by the venue, you know. How do we get people in and out? We got to figure out what's going on. We have tons and tons of dynamic message boards, but there's a lot of stipulations with where I can and can't use them in state government. You know, it has to really be on a state road. I can't really put them anywhere else, so they may need to be talking to a local jurisdiction about using some message boards to assist with traffic control. Or I may have to tell the venue, you're going to have to get a message board up here somehow, some way, and it needs to come out of your pocket. You have to kind of start working that stuff out. Traffic control, you know, again, I can't really get into that, but we're going to look at how's traffic flowing in, how's traffic flowing out of this place. We're all smart enough to realize that left-hand turns are bad things, so we're going to try to get them in with a right-hand turn and not let traffic. Does that upset people? Absolutely. You're going to go in and out the way I want you to, whether you want to or not, if I'm in charge of that event. Now, the crowd control, again, that's going to be security on the inside for a normal issue, but if this would turn into a large altercation, maybe a demonstration, maybe something like that, again, they'll probably call public safety because we're a force multiplier, and we'll go ahead and start sending some people there, start dealing with large crowds. People we look for from public safety on the avenue for help, we're going to always get with the Iowa Department of Transportation. They have a ton of resources. If you haven't had the time to go up and see their traffic management center, I suggest you do that. They are leaps and bounds ahead of public safety on how to send out social messaging and get messages pushed out. I don't even want to try and catch up. I just use the DOT to help me with that stuff. They've got barricades. They've got message boards. They've got additional people with trucks that can come and help you. So just remember they're available. In that same line, I don't want you to forget, hey, it can be the Iowa DOT, but it also could be secondary roads, and your local public works can help you with that kind of stuff. Also, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources and the Coast Guard, if we're having an event along the Mississippi River, especially in LeClaire, I know there's 2 DNR officers in a boat every night, all night long, until we're done with that event. Well, the thing that gets forgotten tremendously is the railroad jurisdiction. If you have a train track that is getting close to your event or around your event, it's best that you notify the railroad what's going on, so that way the railroad can get there to help you. They have jurisdiction up on there, but it's one of those things you kind of want to give them a heads up because it does take them a while to get there. Again, I'm talking about the Mississippi River where I dealt with it for 8 years, is all these town events, the train literally runs between where the water, the event, the train tracks, and then the city. So they have to cross the train tracks to get to the event. So we deal with a lot of issues with trespass and stuff like that, and you got to have them on board. The mass transit jurisdictions, if you're having a big event, we may think about parking cars off-site and working with some type like a Des Moines Metro here. We've used their bus system to help assist. We're going to park cars at the Capitol, and we're going to bus people to the event because we just don't have a place to put these cars. So you got to start figuring out, hey, what can and can't we do? Incident command, is it necessary? It is truly event specific. But don't try to do an event without having at least some type of incident command. And again, it could be as simple as, hey, they have Neil's phone number, so if this gets sideways, they can immediately call us, and I already know who I'm going to start sending that way to help them. You have to have that type of communication to have a successful event. If it can be formalized, when I started up at the ISU games, Keith Morgan would know that. We never, ever had a unified command center up there. Now we do. It's just paid off dividends for us. Everybody's on the same page because we don't have to go look at them. If I'm the one that's responsible, for instance, if I'm the one that's responsible to report the incident command and I'm just driving around waiting to be called, I could instantaneously be tied up because I could be the one that's actually at the wreck or at the incident, and now I have to deal with it. So we try to make sure that who's ever going to be responsible for that incident command is not getting any additional duties, because if it goes sideways, that person's going to be extremely busy. I don't know about you folks, but we document everything. If, like today, if this was a pre-planning meeting, I'd have notes. I'd go back on a supplemental form. I'd start typing notes. This is what we determined. This is what I was told. Here's the people that are responsible. Here's the information. We document everything. I don't know on the EMA world if you guys are doing that, or even in the fire and the EMS side if they're doing that, but you need to start doing it. That's where the ICS forms actually help as far as I'm concerned. They're a little cumbersome, I admit that, but they're designed to help collect and record this data to keep you out of trouble because you just don't know who's going to need it. You know, if something happens at an event, they've got 2 years to file civil litigation. If they want to extend it out for the maximum amount of time, they have up to 10 years. You know, so I truly try to keep my notes and what's going on. I collect as much information as I can, create a case file, and anything that I think could be important. Now, everybody out there is thinking, oh, man, I don't have time to do all this stuff, and I don't need all these case files. That's where you got to decide, hey, is this an event government should be involved in, or is this an event that's a normal, everyday thing at this venue, and they really don't need anything from us? That's as simple as it gets. Resource allocation and management of stuff, again, it's not the only thing you're responsible for, so don't use up all your daily resources. Remember, for me, if I'm in the metro area here in Des Moines, and I have an event at ISU, and I've got 10 troopers tied up, I still need to have at least 4 out working the road because they're going to, all this traffic is coming across these roads to head to this venue, and let's face it, somebody's going to make a mistake and something bad's going to happen, and we're going to have to get into the game and start helping people out. So you want to get prepared. You don't want to run yourself dry, and I see that in a lot of small communities and small counties when I was dealing with RAGBRAI. You know, they just don't have that many people, and I understand that, but they would run themselves dry. So now all of a sudden you've got a normal burglary out on a farm, you got a regular car wreck somewhere, or you got a transport for a mental problem, and we got nobody to deal with it, so you don't run yourself out of players. Again, work out the scope of work and the financial obligations up front. If this turns into an incident, just get things taken care of and work out the paperwork later. But you don't want to, after this event, start trying to figure out who's paying for what. Because what happens if the event is not successful and the authority having jurisdiction is basically bankrupt? You know, we at the Iowa State Patrol or Hardin County Sheriff's Office has already spent a ton of money to have officers there to help and set this stuff up. We need to make sure that that's taken care of and it's not affecting our budget. Because if you start paying to help one venue specifically all the time out of your budget, where do you draw that line at for the next person? So you got to be really, really careful and make sure you can always tie government involvement to a safety issue, and you should be pretty good from the lawyers I've talked with. Again, I know this is quick. Big thing with this stuff, you can't eliminate all the event security risks, but you can reduce them likelihood, minimize the chance for harm to your guests, and discourage agitators from causing trouble. The keys to good security and preparation and vigilance is if you consider your potential threats and invest resources into countering trouble, you'll host a safe event for your guests. That is the key to survival, is figuring out what could go wrong and how do we prevent it. This is my contact information, and if you guys aren't aware of it, this is the picture that we used to win the American Association of Troopers calendar. So we were ranked number 10 out of all 50 this year, and that's the picture they used for the calendar. But if you want to get a hold of me, the best is just to call my cell phone number, because I always have that with me. That's 641-275-0441, and I'll help you with anything. And don't worry about what time of day or night it is, because my phone at my house rings all night long, so it's not a big deal. Let me see, how do I figure out if I got questions?
Hey Neil, this is Steve. So I've been monitoring the questions and answers and the presentation. So a couple people wanted to say hi. Lori Glover and Thomas Creighton both said to tell you hi. And Lisa Roberts said nice presentation. So that's all we got for right now. If you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the question and answer, and I will read them off so that Neil can see those. I do want to take a minute to thanks to Neil for giving this presentation. I think it was really helpful. I think it, the situation where we look at events from like RAGBRAI to county fairs to the state fair, whatever the situation is, a lot of the information that he provided today could be beneficial, I think, in helping, develop your plans and figuring out, no matter the size of the event. So, we'll leave it up
Even though we're
for-
talking about it from a public safety standpoint, there's no way I can help plan an event without talking to my fire and my EMS people. I mean,
Yep.
everybody has to be on the same page and understand what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, and I think the point you brought up about public health too, and working with local public health is a huge issue. In terms of the authority having jurisdiction and the information you talked about there too, as far as who has the authority to shut the operations down. If you have bad weather, that obviously was a huge deal after the Indiana State Fair collapse a few years ago. So having those conversations up front and going through that, I think, is extremely beneficial.
And that's where I always try to get a hold of the EMA, and I admit I'm poor at it sometimes because I'm thinking about cop stuff. He usually has all those contacts, so that's why you want to give him a heads up. Hey, I could be calling you needing this, this, and this. So
right.
When we run the rag-by route across the state of Iowa, we try to touch base with them. Usually it's the sheriff's department or the local jurisdiction or the law enforcement will tell us they've already talked to them, but we always try to send a message for a heads up that, hey, we're going to be coming through here.
Yeah, definitely. So Daryl Connect says, good information, thank you. Mel Burton says, thank you also from Ringgold County. So we'll leave this up. What I will ask all the participants, if you don't have any questions, you will have to leave your screen up. Like I said, the last session, I think it was about 5 minutes before the end that the survey did finally pop up on my screen. So it's supposed to pop up with about 10 minutes left. But if you would just leave your screens up, and you might have to minimize your screen, but that survey tool should pop up. If it does not, get a hold of Beth Rye, and we'll make sure that we get a survey out for the presentation.